Hello. It's Sunday. It's February 1st. This is episode 5.0, Super Sunday. Obviously, Super Bowl today. Um, we're getting actually started. Those of you tuning in live, you know, we're about 25 minutes behind schedule. We'll go ahead and blame the game on that. Getting a slow start. I was only partially responsible. Just kind of a slow night tonight, getting started. It's going to be really short, just to kind of a check in. I definitely want to make sure that that I do my best to check in every night. Um, it's just something I've sort of committed to doing. I know some of you out there have been committing to daily, um, making daily commitments, be they daily commitments about exercise, daily commitments about maintaining your sobriety, maintaining your daily adherence to med compliance, um, or just daily commitment to be the best person you can be that day, to try and be better than you were yesterday. We don't ever have to be great. I mean, we can't promise that, but the things we can try to do is we could be as good as we can in the moment. We can also strive to be better than we have been in the past, and that always gives us a chance to sort of stabilize and to make improvements. And that goes for anything that we have to do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm working on that on my day-to-day commitment here, doing this live little broadcast, random thoughts with random access in Dutch. Today is Dutch's birthday, and as a gift to Dutch, he has the night off. Happy birthday, Dutch! Hope you're enjoying your night off. Hope your team won in the Super Bowl, which I know it did because your team is Dallas. But of the two teams that were playing, sadly disappointed by that terrible, terrible finish to the game. For those of you who did not see the game or don't remember the end of the game, it was Seattle and New England, and Seattle just decided to throw away their entire season, and throw away what got them there in the first place, which was the running game of Marshall Lynch inside the 5 yard line. Uh, they were inside the 5 yard line with less than 30 seconds to go in the game, down by 4, so a field goal does them no good. And all they got to do is give the ball to Marshall Lynch a couple of times. Okay, even if he doesn't make it, that's the way you go out. You say, you know what, we went out doing what we do best, and it just wasn't good enough today. No, no, no. They tried something different. They tried to change it up. Don't change up things at crucial moments. You change up things after you learn a lesson. You learn a lesson. You say, maybe I need to change things up. You don't change things up while they're going good. I don't understand that, especially at that level. Professional sports, Super Bowl. $4.5 million for a 30-second ad. Whoa. Think about that. Let that sink in. $150,000 a second to sell your ad. Oh, well, Super Sunday. It's February 1st, 2015. And what's on my mind? The same thing that's always on my mind, which is many things. There are lots of things, local and sustainable. I really believe that we need to focus on local and sustainable solutions for energy, wind and solar in particular, geothermal is possible. We also need to be thinking of local and sustainable solutions for food, water. How can we make sure that we can always have fresh water where we live, given the water that we have where we live? So there's water treatment is a big thing. It's one thing to be bringing in large amounts of water through water pipes and the water grid, but we also have to recognize that what happens when the water grid is down? What happens if there's damage to the pipes? What can we do in that case? I mean, how reliant? I mean, single points of failure are a big problem. If a major water pipe, say the water that brings in water, the water tunnels that bring in water to New York City, I think they're building another one now, where they've been building it for 30 years now. It seems like tunnel 3, tunnel 2. It'll give them a chance so they can close one water tunnel down and still have water coming in. You really need, like, if you're gonna have something like that, you have to have at least double redundancy, right? You have to have two backups. for what you're dealing with. If you don't have a backup, you have a single point of failure. Anything can happen, and you're down. And you don't want that. So you need a backup. This goes with backup files. Anything that you have to have, that you is required. Anything that's important enough that you have to have. You need to have backed up, but you can't have it backed up once. Having it backed up once means if you have a failure, now you're relying on your backup, and you have no backups. If something's really, really important, you have to have two backups. What that allows you to do is use one backup, still have a backup while you get the primary or the original up and running again. You want to make sure that while you're working to get your system up and running, that you also still have a backup. You want to always have a backup. This is related to the once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. And in this case, what it's telling you is that if you have 2 backups, whatever kind of thing brings your system down, if it just brings your primary system down, that's just an accident. I mean, that just happens. Things are going to happen. But every once in a while, when you're not thinking about it, that system's going to go down, and before you can get it up and running again, the other one's going to go down. And that's just a coincidence. Things happen in pairs. That just happens. I mean, things happen once, things happen in pairs. What is very rare and almost never happens is for the third one to go down, lose your third backup, or something else to happen there. To get sort of 3 things like that to happen, now there's a pattern. And when there's a pattern, it really doesn't really matter what you're doing. No system is safe from a patterned attack or a patterned failure. If it's failing due to a pattern, then that's just the way it is. I mean, your system is there's bigger problems cooking than having backups. More backups would not help in that case. So that's why 2 backups is a good rule of thumb. So you back up your computer. You should have an offline backup and maybe an online backup. And plus your active files. This is for things that you really care about. If you're just using your computer and you don't care about your files, 1 backup's more than enough, and maybe even too much. But for things that you really care about, double redundancy, double backups, that's not being overly protective. That's just the way you do it, because and especially for things that you require for survival, like water, power, food. You have to have these things. I remember I worked for a Burger King once, assistant manager. This was in Alabama, and the guy owned several Burger Kings, and I worked at 3 different Burger Kings for him. I was the what do they call it, the relief manager. So at his stores, the manager worked 6 days with 1 day off. And there were 2 shifts of managers. There was the morning shift and the afternoon shift. And I guess there was 2 managers. There was the manager and the assistant manager, and they would kind of rotate one, or however they did it. I'm getting a little fuzzy on the details. It was a long time ago. But what I would do is I would work at each of the 3 stores, 1 morning shift and 1 afternoon shift, 1 opening shift and 1 closing shift. So I would see everything. And then that acts kind of like as I don't know what that had to do with triple redundancy. I was going to think there was a reason that I was going to tell that story. And I was working in all the different stores. I know, because the food ordering, it was the triple redundancy there. We had food deliveries 3 times a week. Burger King food deliveries. They would come, let's say, I don't know, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, or something like that. So it'd be like our Monday, Thursday, Saturday. We'll call it. It doesn't really matter, but it was 3 times a week, and we always ordered enough so that at any time we could miss 2 deliveries, and still have 20% over our biggest week. So we would say, okay, this is the most we've ever had in the store, or the most we've ever needed in a week. And so we'll have to make sure we have that much in the store plus 20%. So we had the walk-in coolers and the walk-in freezers were always stuffed with the deliveries, and the deliveries came 3 times a week. And the reason for that double redundancy there's this double redundancy going on, is that if we missed a delivery on a Monday, because that would happen, a truck broke down. Anything can happen. You miss a Monday delivery. Okay. Now you're saying, well, I missed a delivery. That happens. That's an accident. Every once in a while, you miss a delivery. It turns out you missed the next delivery too because it could be something else. It's that the truck broke down one time, and it turns out that on Thursday, um, something else happened, and we didn't get a delivery. So now you've missed two deliveries. Well, if you don't have enough to get you through a whole week, to get you to that third delivery, now you're screwed because of coincidence. You don't want to be screwed by a coincidence. So we use the triple redundancy or double redundancy plan there, and it got us so that even if we were having our busiest week, we could miss two deliveries and we would still not run out of product. Okay, that wasn't 100%, but there's certainly our main things. I mean, because there are some things we just you don't really count on too much, or you're not careful with the inventory. We try to be careful with the inventory, but certainly not burgers and fries and whatever major things like that. Little things that you could get from another store. The guy had a lot of stores, so there's always a store that had something. But double redundancies, very, very, very important. And I'm not even real sure how I got to that now. I have to go back and watch the beginning of this and see how I got into talking about all these redundancies. But happy Super Bowl. So what was on my mind beside all that? Of course, it's science reporting. I see this all the time, and it's I understand people trying to make headlines, and that's okay. But what I would caution everybody is when you read a headline, especially as it pertains to science, don't use headlines to either reinforce or to change your opinion on science. When you see a science headline, you can just read it, and then you can just take it as a piece of information, and you could mention it to somebody else, casually mention, oh, I saw this headline, if it comes up. But don't use it to say, like, aha, I knew I was right because the headline agrees with me, or maybe I need to change my opinion because of what the headline says. Don't ever do that. Science headlines are notoriously bad. And a lot of it has to do with the details we fill in. As laymen, seeing a science headline, we're non-experts in the field, we read a headline, the words could mean something completely different to somebody who's in the field. Or they are aware of how much detail they should fill in, how much they should assume based on the headline. And as normal people, we don't do that. Our brain likes to fill in as many details as possible with as few points as possible. It's kind of like the lazy brain. It looks around, then it connects all the dots it can connect. And sometimes we like to connect more dots than we should. And what is the one story that made me think of that today? Superconductivity. This has been around for a while. So the idea of superconductivity is you can just imagine electricity flowing without resistance. Usually your electrical wires get hot, right? When you're running something, the electrical wires get hot. Basically, there's friction with the electrons. They're not flowing freely and smoothly, and just whipping along. And then because of that, that getting hot represents losing energy. So if you have like a coil of wire and you put some electricity in it, and it started going around, and you stopped putting electricity in there, eventually the electricity stops flowing through the wire. I've oversimplified it a little bit, but with superconductivity, you can actually store energy as flowing electricity. It just kind of goes around to the wires, and it's hey, it's like filling up, like storing energy overnight. When people aren't using it, we can store it in the wires, and then the next days it's there because it doesn't leak out. We don't, we're not losing anything. We get superconductors. Okay, so, and it goes on beyond that. It's hugely important. The one problem is with superconductivity, it happens at very, very cold temperatures. How cold are we talking about? Just above absolute zero. Absolute zero is a very cold temperature indeed. Hundreds of degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, hundreds of degrees below 0 centigrade. This is just inching above absolute zero. I add a little bit, maybe 50 degrees. They don't. Okay, maybe 50 Kelvin above absolute zero. And trust me, I don't get this, but science people will really get on you if you call it 50 degrees Kelvin. They're not Kelvin. They're not degrees Kelvin. They're just Kelvin. It's like, oh, okay. but there's like degrees centigrade, and if you're measuring changes in degrees centigrade and changes in Kelvin are exactly the same. If something changes by 20 degrees centigrade, it changes by 20 Kelvin. So how come Kelvin aren't degrees? I mean, if the centigrade are degrees, and the changes in the Kelvin are exactly the same as in the degree centigrade, why aren't the Kelvin in degrees? I just can't. I keep my finger on it, but they talk around in circles like it really matters. But okay, it's about 50 Kelvin, which is um, maybe like 270 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. No, maybe centigrade. Centigrade, I think it was 273 centigrade is 273 degrees centigrade is like a negative 270 degrees centigrade is like 0 Kelvin. So 50 Kelvin is like 220 degrees, negative 220 degrees centigrade. It's very cold. Negative, and then negative 220 degrees is, just do the math, about 400, negative 400 Celsius. I mean, Fahrenheit, negative 400 Fahrenheit. It's really cold. But that's where you get superconductivity typically. And then the big thing is room temperature superconductivity. If we can get superconductivity at room temperature, that's like the holy grail. And not even just room temperature, just have to just be a little bit cold, but something where the energy to maintain the low temperature to run it is less energy than the amount of energy that you lose because you don't have superconductivity. Then it's worthwhile, right? Because you say, well, we're going to lose this amount of energy just normally, so we're going to take that energy that we would lose, we'll turn that around and create an environment where we can maintain stable superconductivity. We are nowhere near that. And the goal, of course, is room temperature, where you don't have to do anything. And then we see this headline: oh, this is just achieve superconductivity at room temperature. One is very brief, and they still had to put a ton of energy into it in order to get the superconductivity at the room temperature. They didn't have to put the energy in to make it cold. They had to put the energy in to do something differently. So it's like, okay, so it's still progress. It's something that hadn't been done before. So definitely it's a step forward. And it is also, you can see there's a picture here of a levitating magnet, or a piece of metal levitating by a magnet. But that's where this other place where superconductivity is really important, really useful, is these maglev trains, magnetic levitation trains, or anything else like that. You can rail guns on all kinds of things. But they can. But it's a headline. If you just read it and you're not careful, you might think that it's a earth-shattering news, that it's a game changer, that that the future is here, and it's no, but it's an incremental step. Science kind of happens in increments. So I just caution people against seeing headlines and then see how they get reported in the media. Yeah, so that's the thing. So but superconductivity at room temperature is a big thing. It's a holy grail. Stable, and when they say at temperature, at room temperature, really it means without having to put a lot of energy in, or any energy in, to except for the manufacturer, there's limited information, limited energy. Here they're putting a lot of energy in to achieve it. So it's not quite there yet, but it's there. I mean, it's a step, but it's all about steps. Oh, so what does that mean for science? I don't know, but the U.S. Senate and science. Oh man, I've already talked about this before, but talk about it again because I just can't stop talking about it. Is our Republicans they just cannot accept. They won't. They're not willing to go on record to say that that they can get behind man-made contributions to global climate change. Right, the language has changed from global warming to global climate change in the last 10 years or so, partly because people just don't understand what we mean by global warming. When scientists talk about global warming, they mean the overall average temperature is going up a little bit. Just a couple of degrees centigrade is all that has to go up to really wreak havoc with the environment. The environment stabilizes at some average temperature. You start changing that average temperature, and that makes the climate go crazy. The environment goes crazy. It has to find get reaccustomed to a new medium, a new mean, a new stable temperature. It takes a while for that stability to really find itself. And it may not ever move, but what's happening is temperatures going up, but that's causing wild fluctuations in our weather. And wild fluctuations mean that it can be really cold in the wintertime. We can get tons of snow in the wintertime. And that's not because, and people see that and they say, oh, well, it's not getting warmer, it's getting colder. It's like, oh, I don't have to smack you. Variability is going up. When variability goes up, that means cold times get colder and hot times get hotter. But not only is the variability going up, but the overall mean is going up. So that when you average out those heat waves and those cold snaps, it still comes out a little bit warmer than it was before, a degree or two. And we're maybe on our way to like 3 or 4 degrees. It's, according to the models that we run, devastating to have that much of a change in our temperature. There's a 2 or 3 degree change in temperature. Overall temperature is really disastrous for humans. It depends on other people say, well, it's not going to hurt the earth. Well, but they kind of hear that sometimes. Maybe they misunderstand it. Yeah, it doesn't matter with the earth. It's just like the universe. The universe doesn't care, and the earth doesn't care. The earth is this giant rock in space, and there's just some stuff growing on it. A little fuzzy moss on it. That includes like people, or like the dandruff on the head. Yeah, the earth doesn't care. The earth's going to be whatever temperature it's going to be. In the past, it's been very cold in the past, and the earth is going to be fine. Yes, we're not destroying the earth, but what's happening is we're upsetting the environment on the earth, and the environment on the earth, living things on the earth, kind of are used to the environment they're in. You start changing the environment they're in, then everything that's living is at risk. Some things will survive, but not everything, and certainly not most things. Most things, they are only alive today because they fit into their little environmental niches really well. You upset that niche, it upsets too many other things. Small things start dying, so the things that eat them can't. They don't have anything to eat, so they start dying. Then the things that eat them, on up the food chain, it wipes out the food chain. All kinds of terrible things happen when there's small changes in the weather. So we stopped saying global warming, and we started talking about global climate change. And there's this little thing, maybe I'll just attribute it to Mark Twain. I think everything should be attributed to Mark Twain because he was such a wise person. But about different in climate and weather, and that's other things that people say, oh, if the climate's not changing, look at the weather outside. Climate and weather are two different things. And also I'll attribute it to Mark Twain. He may or may not have said this, and it doesn't really matter who said it first, but this is a pretty good way to capture it. Is a climate is what you expect, and weather is what you get. And in there, you're kind of capturing the variability. The weather is the variability. It's the things that kind of oscillate. It's the up and down. But the climate is kind of what you expect. You can imagine a trajectory going up even, and some variability around that trajectory. Well, the overall trajectory is up, but the variability could be all over the place. It's all over the place, but limited by, so the weather is limited by the climate, but it can still go up and down. They can swing wildly up and down, but it's still tethered to the climate. So the climate's what you expect to happen, and the weather is what you actually get. So there's a, as a bumper sticker, climate is what you expect, weather is what you get. And the climate and weather are both changing. The weather is becoming more intense as the climate changes. But weather's always been weather, so that's another thing, is you can't ever point to one thing and say, oh, that hurricane is because of climate change. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. One hurricane is not because of climate change. What is because of climate change is greater numbers of more intense hurricanes. It's not any one in particular. It's the collection of the weather patterns that's the result of global climate change. It's not any one weather event, but it's the collection of weather events. And that's a little difficult thing to get a hold of. It's a bit like evolution in a sense, really. I mean, evolution is what happens to an entire population, not what happens to an individual. Right? You can't look at one individual and tell anything about evolution. You can look at one individual and tell you what you have, You can look at one person and see what their DNA is. You can look at one day and look at one location, and you can check the weather, so you can get one point of information by looking at one individual. But you don't get the overall pattern. The overall pattern, the evolution or the climate, it comes from a population. It's how populations change, how climate change, weather changes over a pattern, and that's why you normally need about 30 years of weather data before you can start even making any kind of climate assessments. It really takes about 30 years of weather data and say, okay, we got one data point of climate for this 30 years. And then you can take another 30 years. You can do like a moving average, but you need about 30 years to drown out all the noise because of the variability in weather. You got to make sure you're taking enough data so that all the low noise gets canceled out. And it takes about 30 years of weather data to really get that noise down to where it's not too serious. That you can tell from like a half a degree change in or even a tenth of a degree change in weather in the climate. In order to get that kind of resolution, you need lots of weather data, which means that you can't look at 5 years ago and now and then say the climate's changed in the last 5 years. We don't know that, but what we can say is we can look 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. We can start getting more than 30 years from here and start seeing how things have been changing relative to here. And yeah, well, the climate is changing. There's no doubt about that. But we can't get the senators to agree to that. The Republican senators in particular. There was a vote recently, and it was like 48 out of 54. I don't know how many there are. I didn't read it, but it was certainly most of them. And I think I just jumped past it here on the page. 49 out of 54 Republican senators, I've seen this kind of in the middle of the page here, would not say that they would believe that human activity is a contributing factor to the significant contributing factor, even though it's basically every climatologist, every scientist who studies the climate says this. But they know better. Like almost all of them know better. So there's it shows they have a fundamental lack of understanding how science works. And it's on the order of like 90% of scientists in general believe that the man-made contributions are significant to global warming. And that the scientists understand how science works. Psychologists believe it. Scientists in general generally accept it. I mean, they haven't done the work, they haven't done the research themselves, but they understand how research works and and they understand how science works. So they tend to believe when there's consensus among experts, they tend to believe that. That's an important thing. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're right, but why would you go against it when we have there's less evidence of evolution. It seems like there's less evidence of gravity than there is of it's on the order of that. Really no experts understand. We don't know anything about gravity. We know how it works. We know we can write down equations that describe it. Nobody knows why gravity works. We don't know why gravity works at all. It's a complete mystery, but we can at least model how it works, but we have no idea what causes gravity. We know that humans are causing global warming. That just goes without saying. I mean, okay, well, these are posts that you find on the Random Thoughts with Random Access page, and mostly they're just posts that make me think. I see something about them, or it kind of harkens back to a message that I hold dearly, whether it be local and sustainable solutions for global issues, whether it's about just understanding science, being science-minded. And being science-minded is not doing science. You don't have to put on a lab coat and get a Bunsen burner and some beakers. Being science-minded means asking questions for which the answers are meaningful. That's real. And what does that mean? Well, that means if you ask the question again, you kind of get the same answer. That the questions are meaningful in that way. Science experiments. You can set up a science experiment. If you set up science experiments and you get different results every time you set them up, it's not a very good science experiment. And science experiment should get a predictable result. That's the whole point of doing science is I want to get a predictable result, and then I want to take note what that predictable result is. It's about asking the right question, and then you can get a meaningful answer. Setting up the right experiment gives you a meaningful answer. So that means you have to negate the influence of confounding factors. You have to have controls. You have to have standards. You have to have rigorous analysis. But you can do all that stuff without doing sort of what you might think of as science, but just in your day-to-day life. When you're trying to figure out things, when you're just trying to think about problems or just think about issues, or you're just trying to ask questions of the universe. The universe is doing what it's doing, and science is trying to listen in. But we're all trying to listen in. We're all trying to connect with the universe. We're all trying to clear up our perceptions. We want to deal with our volatile emotions. We want to deal with our, lack of clarity of thinking. We want to have clear thinking. We want to have stable emotional responses, and we want to have a clearer perspective. We want to put together a perception that is as uninfluenced by personal bias and maybe things that contribute to lack of clarity of thought. Things like addictions or things like mental illness can certain thought disorders can interfere. Um, so med compliance is important, and managing your emotions. Be through meditation or other sort of mindfulness related activities, or just kind of careful reflection, kind of bring yourself down, center yourself, or it might be medication. Some people will have to take stabilizers to certain medications to keep their emotional volatility down. You have to control that, and then your perspective, which is going to be tied into your gut feelings, knee-jerk responses, the way you were brought up. Understanding how you were brought up and how that influences your perspective is important. Any intensive training that you do, if you study something for a long period of time, it starts becoming part of who you are. Writers and poets will think about the world. They think about words differently, and that influences how they think about the world, because we think in words a lot, translated and into words, and then they get communicated to other people using language. And so the way thoughts are expressed and shared, depending on words. So I think people like writers and poets think about words differently, so they communicate a little bit differently, maybe, and they also look at the world differently. Because when they see something, they express it differently to themselves, so think about it differently. But we all do that. Anything that you do intensive training um, starts to shape the way that you look at the world, which is another reason why we'd like to try and teach more science to more kids at a younger age, to get them to think with science-minded thoughts. We want them to think scientifically. They don't have to memorize what the scientific method is. They need to understand what the scientific method is trying to do. What is the goal here? The goal is to connect you with the universe. It's just to give you the best opportunity possible at interpreting the events of the universe, the message of the universe. You're always being talked to by the universe. There's things happening around us all the time, and we can only take in a small fraction of it at any given moment. So why would we want to take that in and then horribly distort it to the point we can't make sense out of it, or that we end up engaging in behaviors that are inappropriate for the situation because we misunderstood the situation, we misinterpreted the situation. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're connecting with the universe with as little interference as possible. And that's what science is. That's really all science is. You can memorize the scientific method, the 7 or 8 steps to scientific method, but it really comes down to asking the right questions and then being careful to listen for the answers. And that's what your scientific experiments are. There's these hypotheses, which are kind of the questions that you formulate, which you don't know the answers to before you ask them. But you ask the question and you set up the experiment, which is the listening part, and you carefully listen after you ask the question. And if you've asked the right question, you'll hear the truth. And that's true of any connection with the universe. It's knowing, it's that aha moment when it comes to you, what comes to you is there's a thought in your head that is usually driven by a question, and I can turn it. I can imagine that for every aha moment there's ever been experienced by any human, there was really a question that with that question came this answer rushing that it seems like it could just it germinates from inside of us, and we suddenly know the answer to the question. We have this spark of understanding. We have this aha moment. It can be all the way up to a revelation or an epiphany. A veritable religious experience. It can just be this unbelievable, um, just rock your world. Just everything you thought before is now completely different. And there's an example. There's an expression. Every human lives two lives. The second life begins when you realize you only have one life. Um, and what that really is referencing, of course, is the fact that you look at the world differently once you realize that. You only had one life the entire time, but in a sense, you live two different lives. I mean, just the way you look at the world is different up until the point you realize you only have one life to live. And once that sinks in, it's like, whoa. And you, at that point, you're really living two different lives. You had the first life that you lived up until the point you realize you only had one life. So everybody lives two lives. And the second one begins when you realize you only have one life to live. That's it's I'm gonna have to end it there because I've probably rambled way longer than I had intended and wanted to. So just gonna wrap up with the traditional TweetDeck Twitter response, and we have our Facebook page. That's Random Thoughts with Random Access, but you can also catch us up on Twitter. Send out a RTWRE. That's Random Thoughts with Random Access, and or you can actually send a tweet to us, and that's at Random Access. The tweet will come to us, or you can just use our hashtag RTWRE as Random Thoughts with Random Access. You can also catch us on our feedback line. That's open every night, 11 to midnight after the show. And it's open every day, 3 to 5 on weekends, 3 to 4 during the week. And number's good in the US and Canada. It's 15189-666-175. That's 15189-666-175. 11 to midnight every night after the show. 3 to 5 on the weekends and 3 to 4 during the week. If you call outside those times, you'll be asked to leave a message, and we'll get that from you. So give us some feedback, performance feedback revision, and we need the feedback, and we do that so we can learn, improve, share. I think we all need to evolve our lives, so we want to learn, improve, share, and we can do that with performance feedback revision. The evolution of spirit is no different than the evolution of the cosmos and the evolution of life. It's mutation, selection, heritability. This cycle, this three-phase cycle, occurs within us, in the universe, and also for life in general. It's out there. Look for it. 3 is an important number. Today's Super Sunday. I'm Random Access, and we'll be back tomorrow night. Until then, courage, and thank you very much.